My name is John Orlock. I'm a professor in the English department and here at Case Western Reserve, and I am joined this afternoon by three colleagues, three collaborators, and to my left is
Denise, Caterinacci in the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures in the Italian section in the department.
And I'm Genevieve Mathieson. I work in instructional technology and academic computing, and I helped with a lot of the technology support for the project. Fine.
Michael.
And finally.
My name is Michael. I'm a former student, just graduated, and I also helped out with the technological side of things. And some of the Italian before.
And some of the Italian as well, yes.
Former student of Italian at Case, yeah.
We have put the title on this for this afternoon of Conflict, Passion, Existentialism in Skype.
And that's why I'm here. That's the best title ever.
Wow, good. There you are. I mean, and we said this because it is trying to pull you in to see, but this is a distillation of what the process was for us to go through this. And what our intention is that by the end of the afternoon, the end of the half hour, 40 minutes, you will have some sense of what our process was, but on a larger scale, that as you look at similar projects, that you might come away with a better roadmap than we had at the beginning. Because we have a very different map now at the end of the project, or as we approach the very end of the project, than one we had when we went into this over a year ago, was when the first proposal came along. And the idea then was to have, at Case, there would be a contingent of playwriting students and a contingent of students studying Italian. In Urbino, at the University of Urbino in Italy, there would be a balance of that. They would have playwriting students and students studying English, and the intention of the project was that through real-time collaboration, we would have the American students' plays translated into Italian, the Italian students' plays translated into English, accompanied by a seminar a weekly seminar in live time also with the Urbino faculty and with our faculty on contemporary American and Italian dramatists. And at the end, it would culminate in the first Case Western Reserve CyberFest of new plays, which only a week ago today, we were smack in the middle of. So this is brand new, coming off the starting line into the presentation line. Denise, you want to go on from here about what?
Well, we thought we would start by just recalling a little bit about the process of combining two disciplines with an international scope to them. Combining one of our languages in our Department of Modern Languages and Literatures with another discipline is very appealing for everybody here at the campus. And in particular, we thought that having the students involved in another language-intense activity like writing and playwriting was a good way to combine the interests and the talents of the students and the faculty here and there. And we already had some connection with Italy, and in particular with the University of Urbino through our study abroad course that we started here at Case in 2007. And we've been collaborating with the faculty there too for other things. Another worldwide learning environment project was carried out last year for an Italian conversation program, and that's going to be another focus after this session. it'll be another focus at our CollabTech today. So we decided what would be the best way to approach a project that could use these two disciplines together, and decided that the playwriting would be what we'd like to focus on in connection with translating. So we had our third year students of Italian involved in a special topics course, and the students of playwriting involved in a special topics course in the other department in English.
And that this was the first time that my students as playwrights had been involved in anything like this. I mean, this was, from the very beginning, we were moving into new territory. We were the pioneers. We were moving out into a project that we had to keep reminding ourselves, our students, and our collaborators in Italy that this is experimental. We are trying things. We are revising things. And by the way, this is a view out of one of the classroom buildings in Urbino. So you see right off that there is nothing quite like Euclid Avenue going through there. And I thought we would start with this as a visual representation of the distinctions and the assumptions and counter-assumptions that we had, that as we moved into the project, we often discovered are less true than we had first assumed. And some of these certainties and uncertainties involved what they expected of us.
Well, once we were relatively certain of what the collaboration internally was going to be, then we decided how are we going to involve the Italian side more closely with this. And we had to present our ideas to them and allow them to get a feel for how this could all be integrated together. So we had to explain to them that we were conceptualizing a plan that had never been done before, and it was going to involve a lot of experimenting. And experimenting, from their perspective, was largely unknown in this regard, in terms of experimenting with a whole new approach internationally and designing a course together in this way. It's not typically done in that system. So we had to adapt on both sides to the thinking that generated this plan in the first place. And we started by explaining to them what we thought our idea was in rough terms, and we thought that they did understand what we were trying to convey to them, only to find out that eventually we weren't making ourselves clear, not because of language differences or even cultural differences, but differences in the planning in the two systems.
Right, I mean, very different mindsets coming into this. That we were clear on paper, we had understanding, good. We have this, we're interested in participating, and one of the components that we found to be essential and that we would highly recommend if any kind of collaboration is that you have to go. You have to go. So in October, Denise and I went to Urbino, and Denise had been there previously several times. She was familiar with both the faculty and with the setting, but this was my first time into that part of Italy. And even for something as simple as the classroom spaces, the classrooms are in 16th century palazzi. You know, so you have frescoes on the ceiling and these walls and these. One thing in particular I found intriguing was a secret passage that seemed a little tiny narrow door that went from one room up into a classroom, sort of an escape hatch if you needed it for a professor, which I think is a very useful tool that we're suggesting that we have here at Case. A small escape hatch in the back of any classroom can be used. But it was this idea of seeing the context and having that level of understanding about what it was and who it was that we would be dealing with. But even when we were there, even though that the writing had been presented very clearly, when we got there, we discovered that it was less so.
Right, and some of that lack of understanding initially comes from not having a good grounding in the different system of operating. How is it that an American university can come up with this approach to teaching and involving students? And then we had the whole new element for both sides of trying things with technology that we had not tried before and becoming more comfortable with that. And we had a whole series of efforts at just learning, experiments. What is the best way to start managing the technology side of this?
And in that, I mean, we had in our heads the idea that Adobe Connect was the platform that would best serve our needs. And this is because we had read about what Adobe Connect was. It sounded, this is ideal. We had some rather thorough classes through case instruction about how this comes together. And what we discovered was that, and discovered not without a small amount of frustration, that Adobe Connect was not going to be the platform. Genevieve?
I can talk a little bit about this. Initially, when we spoke about what technology needs the project had, the first thing that came to mind was video conferencing, actually. The very first idea was video conferencing, which would have been ideal. But as it turns out, we here at Case Campus have a couple of different forms of video conferencing available to us. We have IP-based and ISDN-based video conferencing as options. In Urbino, they only had ISDN-based video conferencing available on a very limited basis, and it's exceedingly expensive to use. So that really kind of eliminated it as an option. It would have been the ideal, but it was not an option. So that was when John and Denise started looking at the web conferencing solutions. And as they say, they attended several workshops on Adobe Connect, trying to learn the system. But Adobe Connect is an excellent collaborative tool, but it is a very complex collaborative tool. And if you are not familiar with the technology, it can become a hurdle to the project that you're trying to achieve. At the same time that we were all struggling with the learning curve with Urbino and our side, we also were having a few technological issues with Adobe Connect. We had some networking problems, and we worked extensively with Adobe to resolve them. But it was really exacerbating the issues that Denise and John were experiencing. It made several attempted meetings with Urbino literally impossible.
Well, not quite impossible. we would spend an hour with the level of communication being, can you hear me? and after several of these, I'm thinking, how can we discuss contemporary drama or anything when right now we're still saying, can you hear me? So it was not conducive to complex thought at the moment.
The other problem, unfortunately, was that the professors at Urbino were completely unfamiliar with the technology and also had problems with the computers they were trying to use. So they had bad audio or no audio, which was, again, exacerbating the issue. So we were resorting to phone calls more often than not, and that wasn't going to work for the project. So in the end, we went back to the very basic concept of using Skype.
Right.
And found that we were having some of the same issues with Skype that we were having with Adobe Connect because of the audio issues and the video issues, but it eliminated the complexity problem. And that was when that was where you ended up settling, was the idea of Skype.
Right, and it was at that point that a certain burden of technology was lifted. And I said, well, this is simple. You know, it's essentially a point and shoot operation then. We had an idea of having Adobe Connect with every student with their own screen in front of them, and then we could have text, and it sounded fabulous. Document sharing. What we ended up with was simpler, but in its simplicity, much more effective, just reducing the levels of anxiety going into every session.
One of the important parts of our collaboration was to have the students interacting with each other on the scripts that were eventually produced. And so that's why Adobe Connect seemed to be ideal from that point of view, that numerous students in their own screens could be discussing a document they were all seeing, and they could work on that together. And so instead of that, we did rely on email to send documents, and they had to work on the documents in that way. Being so focused on the technology and a little anxious about it in the beginning did distract some of the attention from working on other sides of the project or trying things that we would have still liked to be able to try and didn't seem to get to. I mean, not everything we had hoped to achieve in the project actually came to life, but many features of that certainly did. And we had some very wonderful sessions through Skype. At the end of the semester, we had 6 collaborative sessions during classroom time, where we had the class in Italy, which had 8 students and the 2 professors there, and my Italian special topics course in translation of dramatic writing, and then the English special topics course in playwriting. So we had 3 groups basically together on this. And during the sessions we did have with Skype, the students were sharing their impressions of how their culture was conveyed in what they had chosen to write about, and what aspects of American life they could identify in those scripts, things they didn't know about, insightful understanding of the thinking in their peers here.
Right, and
What could you see on the screen
All right,
during these
good.
Skype sessions?
what we saw, I mean, and this is what we had, it wasn't until we were almost done, actually, truth in presentation here. We are sitting around brainstorming for this session on Tuesday. And we're talking about the elements we're talking here. Now, we had in the basement of Guilford House a screen about that size that we were seeing their class, and as if they were gathered around the fire. I mean, everyone's with a lens that was coming off of a laptop, and we had sent them a Polycom box, so that they had this for speaker box. I mean, to bring in the sounds, which was fairly effective. As we were discussing this and the various limitations, we had the epiphany that while we were seeing them, not quite 3D, but we were seeing them on a large screen for the full class, they are viewing us, 8 or 10 people gathered around a laptop screen, which is, the image is even smaller, and not sure what degree of resolution that they were getting on this. So it was, on both sides, a very different visual experience. Going back into it, in the future, we would look to have that experience enhanced in some way. Yes?
Was both the English class and the foreign language class, were they gathered together in the basement of Guilford
Yes.
in one?
Yes, yes. So we have our group of 6 students, Michael, Denise and I, and at one point, one of their professors had come here for a week. And so she was here, first time in Cleveland, first time in the US, in fact. And she loves Cleveland. I mean, this is where if you start them off in Cleveland, I mean, how are you going to keep them down on the farm? I mean, once they've seen Cleveland and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Case Western Reserve, there's no going back. But this was for her very useful also, to have a visceral understanding of what our system was, what our students were like. And she got to see them on the large screen then also.
I will just interject that on our side we had a speaker box as well, a chat duo speaker box that was able to pick up room audio quite clearly, and we had an HD Logitech camera that we were using. So even though they were viewing us on a very small screen, the image was very good. It was very clear. So I think that made up for some of the problems, because the students did seem quite responsive to what the students at this end were doing, even given that limitation.
But judging if something is working well or not is very relative, because even in our very first efforts, when we had them as a group, just to see our class together there on the small screen with bad image through Skype was amazing for them. And they were delighted. It didn't matter. And they had one mic like this that they were all passing around the room together. And that's when we decided, oh, well, let's send a conference box out there, because then there won't be this interference of the mic, and let's see how that changes things. And it did change things tremendously. So as we were making things more comfortable and the technology was improving, then we saw that they were also rising up to getting more involved with what we were actually there to be doing together, which was exchanging comments and opinions and dialogue about the writing they were doing.
Was the audio completely separate system from the video? That is, if you shut their PC off, could you still hear them?
Well, the conference box is linked to
it's a
the
USB
PC.
plug-in,
Yeah.
so it
Oh,
was
it plugs into the computer.
Right.
correct, yeah.
So it was a teleconferenced Skype box.
That's right.
Right. And
Skype box.
following up something Denise was saying, there was an excitement to see, and I think even for our students, especially for our students, who I seem to consider them, in terms of tech, very sophisticated, very blasé about big deal, but there was an excitement that they are talking with a class in Italy in live time, and that was really neat and fun to experience and energizing for the project, as I believe it was for them as well.
And also made both sides more aware of how much of their own reality they kind of take for granted, and not realizing that that reality is something that would be a big novelty to the other side. In one of the scripts, for example, there was writing about Dunkin' Donuts. Well, there are no Dunkin' Donuts in Italy yet. And so the writer, who was the American student writer, didn't even think that setting in Dunkin' Donuts was very significant to the Italian reader, that would require some sort of explanation, because aside from just being a donut shop, it has other connotations with Dunkin' Donuts. It's a cultural manifestation that they weren't expecting to see emerge in their own writing. So as we were doing this back and forth in both languages, the students themselves were getting an awareness of what their own cultural manifestations all around them really are, but they're not regarding them that way. This helped them with that.
And building upon that there were also intellectual cultures that were different, that their students would comment on the American students' material or on the American plays in very much a philosophical, existential, what are the ramifications here for, what is the symbolism embedded in this? And our students are saying, what? It's a father and a son arguing. But they would say, no, but is this father? They were interested in also, they would ask my student writers, well, is your father like this? Are you, it was a very different sort of questioning and interrogation and examination of the text than we are accustomed from this end. What else would you say about that?
Well, the class that we had as our peer group class in Italy were students of literature. more so than having experience in dramatic writing or in theater. So they were very astonished at how our students during the CyberFest actually carried out the readings of their plays. And we have to say that the experience of seeing the CyberFest come to fruition and see that we started with absolutely nothing and watched this process of the students writing their scripts and rewriting and struggling through things and working very closely with John to come up with solutions. And then to see the students on the other side reading the American students' scripts that we had translated into Italian, and then they refined further in Italian. And see the students reading them in Italian as though it had originated in that language, very naturally. It was a very moving experience for everybody.
To hear, we had two sets. There was a father-son conflict from here, and there was a father-daughter conflict. And the animation of this father-son being read by these two young Italian men, I came away with this, I said afterwards, I mean, immediately, I was so grabbed by this, gripped by the interchange. And I said, Italian is the natural language for father-son arguments. I mean, it is just, I mean, you're saying this, and then what are you saying over here? But no, you know, and it was wonderful and very moving at the same time. It's because there was a sensibility that was infused in this stuff, and and strongly agree with Denise about that. At the end of it last week, we were exhausted. We were wiped out. It was like mounting a huge production with many, many more actors and many, many more tech complications than we had. But the amount of emotional energy that was invested in this and getting it there was considerable. But we know something more now. What do we know?
Well, through all this, what we know now is that you have to approach a concept with our colleagues here first and think about what could be done. Think big, very big, but realize that big is going to probably be tapered down eventually into more realistic terms. And that's all right if that happens, because there's a lot of variables that you just can't plan on along the way, and things that you are learning about on both sides that require adjustments and allow you to make those changes along the way. And what you come up with in the end might not be anything close to what you had envisioned, but it's still an extremely valid product, if you will, of all of that effort.
Right, and we view this as a pilot program, as I said. That's something that we can, having gone through this initial mechanism, that we now can repeat it either with plays as the text, or short fiction, or poetry. The mechanism is in place now for us to go and explore in a different way. Things that we just hadn't thought of at the initial beginning was something as simple as time. I mean, we are 6 hours back from them, so that we would meet at 10 in the morning. We had originally scheduled it very naively at, well, my class is on Tuesdays at 2:30, which puts it at 8 o'clock in the evening, 8:30 in the evening. So we had to move it from an afternoon class to a morning class for us, which was still late afternoon for them. But what else did we learn? Genevieve, what else did we learn?
You learned how to deal with unexpected weather. They had blizzards.
Blizzards in Italy, there you are. I could
You,
No wonder they like Cleveland.
Exactly. I mean, I'm saying, I mean, what is not to like about this place? I mean, we got sunshine and everything but grapefruits.
no, I mean, you had to deal with flexibility of scheduling because things kept on happening. Technology would fail, weather would happen. I mean, just there was always the unexpected element that would force you to think on your feet about that. I mean, just
And
when you could reschedule and.
The calendars, which are details that you kind of tend to overlook in your planning phase. And you go forward with plans, and then suddenly, when you had a date planned for a session, as we did, a few days before, we were told, "Oh, didn't we mention that's our holiday break, so we can't meet that day." So we had to think about, okay, well, can we reschedule that at all, and if so, how? And we had to deal with that.
And one of the things that made all of these changes of plan and alteration and last-minute improvisations possible, I believe, is the fact that there had been an investment in the people beforehand. That if we did not have that goodwill on either side, very easily, after that third session where we're saying, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" I mean, they say, "Look, we're out of here. You know, this American time. We're going back to our lecture and our secret passages. I mean, we don't need this stuff." But we never got to that. There was frustration. We could see it. We could hear it. But that the project always rose above.
They were very good-natured in the face of adversity. I mean, and as you said before, it's because you had that relationship before you embarked on the project.
Did you have a corresponding IT person on the other side?
Some features of a corresponding IT person on the other side at certain moments, not regularly. Not regularly.
And it was difficult to judge how skilled this individual was. I mean, we would go through several sessions with Professor Balducci, in which he would have, this is when we were still back in the Adobe Connect days, when he would have his talk button on, so we are getting this incredible buzz and feedback, and then we're trying to explain to him, someone who has very low tech skills, what the button is that you're looking for on your screen. Did you get to this?
I'm trying to identify a microphone button. Someone who has no idea what he's looking at.
And after the third session, we got it. And what else?
Isn't that why you have video?
You know, yes, but it doesn't work necessarily. I think my biggest problem were the times that I tried to. I was tech support, but I don't speak Italian, and that doesn't work either. The language barrier was an issue for me. Google Translate does not suffice.
Did you have support from Case IT, or did you do it all on your own?
Great support.
You did it. Okay.
That was me.
Okay, great. The answer was no.
No, I left them alone to their own devices the entire semester.
Well, one thing is very clear, that when you have this involvement in two different places and cultures, one thing that emerges very clearly is that you develop a new appreciation for your own setting from the eyes of somebody who's looking at it completely new. And so yes, from that perspective, Cleveland is gorgeous all of a sudden. And our technology is the best in the world. And we felt the same about many things, interacting with their people in their setting, that they take for granted because they're surrounded by it constantly. The art on the walls, the murals, the buildings, the history and the setting. And you reinforce that in each other on both sides. So what we will be having very soon is a complete web page developed about this project. We've got a start already, and that's what you're seeing up there on the screen.
Michael
Store
this with us, and it will have video snippets of the readings. It will have the texts in both languages. It will have an outline of our process. And if you would like, we can send this along to you when it's up. My email is just jmo3@case.edu. And overall, it was an adventure. An adventure unlike any collaboration that I've had here before. And what other questions?
Do you feel like you were able to cover all the content of the course?
No,
in this
not even, I mean,
That was part of the paring down process. We did have very, very ambitious plans for content that we didn't quite reach.
and that was critical. I mean, making those decisions, saying, all right, we're not going to get to this, and letting it go. And it just enabled us to be able to put the time on to where we wanted to put it, or we had left. Yes?
Along the same lines regarding content, you talked about some of the things you sacrificed early on, like some of the desktop sharing. What were your workarounds for things to get the content to these folks? Was it just email and it was that simple? Or, I mean, you're talking text. How did you do the workarounds since you couldn't do the desktop sharing?
Well, in terms of texts and books we were using, we had to send them the complete information so they could get copies of them there. A lot of the plays, they needed ISBN numbers and all of that so they could get their hands on that. Other things we did share through email and scanning.
And scanning. We never reached, I mean, one of the components that we had in our head was that the students would collaborate one-on-one with the translations and the development. We never got to that level. It was still very much a group effort that was guided by the 4 faculty members involved. What else?
That was actually one thing you said you would do the next time, was
Right.
that you would have the students get to know each other better, so that there was more of that collaborative element among the students.
Are you going to do it again? And if so, what are you going to change?
We have a lot of plans for changing things if it were to be done again. And it could be redone in many different ways. We see that now. There are a lot of ways this could be approached.
One of the things that we're talking about is doing it in a very much more concentrated time zone, a time period, so that there is something here at Case which they call a May semester, which is the semester from the end of the regular year until summer school begins. So it's about 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks, and we're talking about taking this whole process and having conflated into this so that we would meet several times a week on a much more intense basis and come out of it much more quickly. And perhaps there would be certain advantages to that.
Mm-hmm.
What about with the technology? You're going to change it?
You know, we have heard of something called
There are some products that we've been looking at
Video.
that would actually improve the video experience. One of them is called Video, is video with a Y. And it has a much cleaner video experience, but the thing is that it doesn't have the same kind of collaborative tools. So if the collaborative piece becomes important, we'll just have to look at the different options. I also just found out that as of next week, Skype is going to be offering more than point-to-point video conferencing. It's going to be offering 5-point. So
that would be
that would
significant.
improve Skype's ability to support the process as well.
Were there bandwidth issues in Italy?
I think so, yes. From what I was observing.
We also had some sort of firewall problem.
We had firewall issues, we had bandwidth issues, we had computers that weren't capable of supporting the technology, we had bad video cameras. It was a myriad of things. We discovered them all.
Unexpected crashes, right when you're in the middle of an important discussion and you have to reconnect again.
Skype would flake out.
I mean, there were times when we would crash or not be able to reach them when we go to telephone
Yeah.
and say, are you there? I mean, again, the basic question of human communication. I mean, are you there? Yes, we're here. All right, we can go to the next step here. Yes?
Did you consider, as one of the professors going to Italy, that you take an iTech person with you?
We hadn't. We were limited in budget, but we will look at this next time.
definitely in the notes is to examine the technology on the other side much more closely. And also because they are reporting they're considering upgrades in their technology. So our project was important to some of their research on what would be launching them more at better destinations with their choices. So we were
received
helpful to them in that, yeah.
We received attention, or they received attention from the highest levels of their university. That was impressive.
Yeah, that's the kind of question I wanted to know. You were dealing with a group of students there and here who have never traveled before. Is that the case?
Some have been to
In
Italy.
some cases,
They have
they're-
already
yeah.
been here and some over there already?
Yeah, some,
Ah, okay.
a few.
All
Not
right, okay.
everybody, by any means,
I think
no.
we have time for one more question, or not.
Or not.
Is there one more?
And so we will let you travel. Bon voyage.
Thank you all for coming.
Grazie.